Hi, welcome to the Addiction Recovery Place podcast, the podcast championing addiction treatment professionals around the world. I'm your host, Chris Langley, and I'm very pleased to introduce today's guest, Stan Duckmanis from Hawaii. Stan is the founder and trainer of Belief Eye Movement Therapy, criminal justice and addictions professional, and an internationally certified substance abuse counselor. Stan is also the author of the book, Drug Court Treatment, The Verdict. Welcome to Addiction Recovery Place podcast, Stan. It's so good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity. Glad to be here with you.
Oh, most definitely. I'm sure everyone's going to love hearing what you've got to say and to find out about the great work that you're doing. And so am I. So we'll start the podcast off. So tell us about yourself and your journey to starting your service in Hawaii.
Well, Chris, it actually started in the Chicago, Illinois area. Mm-hmm. I got involved with the U.S. Navy alcohol and abuse program. It's called NADSAP, NADSAP. And the military has a no-nonsense approach to substance abuse or substance use disorder. Because you can imagine, if a pilot's trying to land, a jet on an aircraft carrier and people are using, it could create a problem. Mm. So they came up with a zero tolerance for substance abuse that would affect performance. So that was my entry level, and I think it was a great first experience for me because it demonstrated that this is a no-nonsense thing. This is life and death we're talking about. So that Navy experience led to other experiences, like in my community, for instance, there was a horrible alcohol and other drug and crime problem. What Wanberg and Milkman referred to as the AOD CTC cycle, alcohol and other drug, criminal thinking and conduct cycle. In fact, the prosecuting attorney got arrested and charged for dealing and using drugs. So you can see what a deep problem it is for every community. Not just that community isn't alone in all this. It's every community has a problem like this, whether they know it or not. So based on that experience, and I could see it going on right across the street from my house. This guy was dealing drugs 1 block away from the high school. And lunchtime looked like a McDonald's drive-in. People were just lined up for drugs. The same thing Friday night on payday. Cars are lined up around the block to get into this guy's house to get. So I thought, well, something's got to be done. So I approached the local drug court judge in my community for a night, just to discuss ideas for the solution with them. And this guy could not have been less interested. He would not give me an appointment. I tried a couple times. Finally, I gave up and decided to leave that area. And I headed for Maui. I flew to Maui with nothing as far as I'm going to Maui. Right. In fact, I didn't even have a room reservation. I took care of that when I got to the airport on the island. So when I got here, I bummed around like vacation time for a week, and then decided I wanted to stay. So I found the employment office a block away from where I was staying. I walked in and told the counselor that I wanted to get a job, and she says, "Well, great." She said, "Do you have any idea what you want to do?" And I said, I'd like to be a substance abuse counselor. And she said, "Oh, okay." Kind of a shocked look on her face. And she turned around and pointed to the back of the office. She says, "Do you see that door back there on the right?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Okay, go through that door, knock on the first door on the left. They're looking for a substance abuse counselor." I thought, you got to be kidding me. It's that simple, I was wondering what's behind door 2 or 3. So I did. And knocked on the door and they hired me. And it turns out that my new employer was the treatment provider to Maui Drug Court. Now, can you imagine? The drug court judge at home turned me down, right? Mm-hmm. So here I tell that lady I want to be a substance abuse counselor. She says, "Okay, go through that door." It turns out my new employer is the treatment provider to Maui Drug Court. Here, I got a completely different I had a completely different experience. The chief drug court judge liked my work. He showcased it. And he suggested that I write a book. In fact, he insisted I write a book. He stayed on me for over 3 years to get it done. And turns out he liked the book so much, he wrote the foreword. So that's how I got started.
So you moved to Hawaii without really knowing what you were going to do, and you walked into a place that was going to help you with employment, and there was your future, basically, right in that.
Yeah, that was it. That was 19 years ago.
Goodness me. I'm not a believer in fate, but you can't argue with that, can you? My goodness.
Well, there are some religious, spiritual overtones here. I could go into that later or anytime you choose, but there was some before and after here that happened. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there were some really strange ways that things got answered.
Yeah.
And that was it. It's like, for how did I choose Maui? How do you fly from the middle of the mainland mm-hmm. to this small rock out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? Then all these things happen in this sequence.
Had you ever been to Maui before?
Oh yeah. Okay. I was in the insurance business before. I was a financial planner, and you sell so much life insurance, you get these awards. Mm-hmm. And Maui was always my favorite place. In fact, after my first trip to Maui, and I knew that Hawaii was going to be in my future. I love this area. I love the islands, the culture, the spirit, everything about it. Mm-hmm. So that's I guess that's a partial answer to how I came back. As opposed to flying off to X. At least I had that in the back of my mind.
So since you've been in Hawaii, then you put together an awesome looking program with some amazing looking services and classes. Can you tell us about your program and what you do for your clients, please?
When I got here, and the boss decided to hire me, he was giving me an orientation and taking me through the classrooms and the offices and all that. And in the main classroom, CBT map, and it looked like CBT, cognitive behavior theory map, and it looked like an electrical diagram to me. Now, I've always had this fear of electricity. Looking at that particular, a little standoffish, but I understood it. And it almost looked like, okay, here's the stimulus, here's the response. But in between was the pattern. This is the how-to. It was a map of how to do CBT. But a lot of people didn't understand that. There was not a lot of training involved in that program. Pretty much a catch as catch can, learn on the job. It was a manual-driven 18-month program. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make a comment here that one of my bugaboos. It was an 18-month program, but not until, and it was a 300-page manual, but not until page 145 did they really stress the importance of beliefs. And I thought, well, how strange. It's halfway through the program, which at that point would be 9 months. And in the addiction field, or even in the criminal field, you can imagine all the things that can happen to an individual within 9 months.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they could be on the run, they could be terminated back in prison, or they could be dead from overdose. And that happened. You've experienced that. Every counselor in the field who's been here for a while has experienced deaths every year. Oh, I thought, well, how are you going to change that behavior if you don't change the beliefs? And I noticed that this was lacking. There was no belief change work going on. But more about that as we go on. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
No, not at all. Please speak freely, because I want our listeners to hear about your experience and your work. It's so important. So something else, you work with individuals and with business owners to help with substance misuse, Dan. So how do you work with employees as well as the business owners themselves? Because that must be quite a sensitive relationship between employer and employee when you're dealing with substance misuse.
Yeah, and because the clients are afraid they're going to lose the employees are afraid they're going to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
If this doesn't go right, if I don't answer all these questions, properly, blah blah blah, my boss is going to find out about me and fire me, and I'll be ruined. Well, first thing, like we're all taught, meet the client where they're at, put them at ease, establish rapport, and get into a conversation. What's really going on here? How did we end up, talking with them, with the business environment, whether it's a business or whether it's a treatment provider organization? There's a disconnect between administration and people in the trenches. And like in the business world, when I was in insurance, it was the difference between the CEO or the owner and a salesperson. How come you're not meeting quotas? How come you're not performing like you're supposed to? And I thought, when I got into this field, I thought, what an amazing mirror image of what's going on in insurance and sales. I suppose any type of sales, whether you're selling vacuum cleaners or flower seeds or whatever, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. You've got to create rapport, establish a need, talk about solutions, and then in sales, after that your prospect understands the solution, it's time to close. And then you close successfully, you get the sale, then you ask for referrals. Well, substance abuse, especially the drug court field, you don't have to ask for referrals. The judge is giving you all the referral you need, So that part of the sales process is absent. But the rest of it, pretty much, instead of selling insurance, I was selling recovery. And I came to see the real importance of beliefs. That if you don't change the core beliefs, the permission granting beliefs, there'll be no long-term behavior change. So it's not about assessments. It's not about treatment updates. It's not about billing. It's about doing change work. That's been my philosophy. It's all about change work. It's not about paperwork.
So how long have you been working with businesses for? How long with your program?
It's been mingled for the last 19 years, but I've any opportunity that I get, I'll work with a business to help them solve their problems, whether it's morale, whether it's okay, well, what type of belief is holding this client back? You have to have these individual, and this is one thing with businesses. It might even be more so than with substance abuse treatment. You have to have the one-on-one conversations with the employees, just like you have to have the one-on-one meetings with your individual clients. Group, getting the message across, 12, 24, or 36 people in group is one thing, but you can really hone in during the individual session. That's where I really got to demonstrate the importance of belief change, the I movement, because I've had people tell me, well, you just can't do that. Yeah, I had one guy in Illinois that said he was always taught that you can't change core beliefs. Well, that's just not true. But as all these other experts like Albert Ellis, Aaron Beck, and Miller and Rolnick, and all these professionals, they dwell on the importance of beliefs, and also the beliefs of the counselor, not just the the patients and the clients, but it's the beliefs of the counselors and therapists.
Something I wanted to touch on, Stan, because you do extensive work. You really do. I've seen your websites and seen what you do. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, you offer continuing education units within your state as well as the state of Wisconsin. How long have you been offering this vital service of people who are training to be a counselor or therapist, or who also want to continue with their professional development?
I started doing continuing ed as soon as I got my certification, which was, I believe, January 1st of 2009. And I thought, at that point, I had like 2 years to think about, well, what I saw is the problem and what I saw is the solution, and things that I saw that I thought were missing. So I wanted to address the missing piece in my continuing ed. So that started about 17 years ago. And it started with ADAD, the Hawaii Alcohol and Drug Abuse Division of the Department of Health. And then I thought, well, Hawaii is such a small state. Why keep all these things a secret here? So I applied to California, and that CCAPP, I believe is the acronym for that, approved my work for the state of California. And I thought, okay, good. Now we're off and running. So then I went to Nevada, and then I went to Illinois, my home state. Everybody approved it. And I've just got great feedback from 100% of the counselors have given me tremendous feedback about what they learned in the program. I was talking with one master's level therapist last week, and she bought my class, and she got it in the form of a PDF. And she said, no, I printed that. She said, I've got your book. I've got your journal right here in my desk, and I keep it here for reference. So, it's great feedback like that keeps me going, because it's a slow, tedious process. And by the way, because of that slow, tedious process, I give you just the greatest props for doing what you're doing, for getting feedback from each of the states, because I know what a task that is. So hats off to you, sir.
Well, thank you. It sure is, but it's a genuine privilege to speak to real experts such as yourself, which is something I love doing with this podcast. It's been a real genuine honor for me. So I thank you for your time today, and thank you for that feedback to myself as well. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Stan, you were previously a NAADAC approved education provider. How long did you work with NAADAC, and what did you enjoy most about working with this national organization?
I worked with NAADAC for 4 years. I loved it. I love the people at NAADAC. Yeah. The staff are just amazing people. And one lady, Jennifer, I think she's just totally outstanding. And I like the idea of working with NAADAC and being approved, because pretty much in all 50 states. So, rather than keep applying to each state one by one, I thought, let's get it done in one fell swoop. And that's what I really enjoyed about the NAADAC opportunity. And it's true. You get to communicate and talk with people from coast to coast. I didn't reach all 50 states like you are, but you're doing a much better job at making that happen than I did. I waited for people to respond, but literally coast to coast and north to south, I got people all over the country.
Yeah,
have used my program. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of proud of that, because, like I say, great feedback.
Yeah, and you worked with NAADAC for 4 years. When did you finish working with them?
This last year. Okay. Renewal came up, and I thought I'm going to go off in different tack this time. Yep. But I think I want to do it again, because I like the NAADAC exposure. Yeah, it's a great organization. Why not work within your organization if that's what you are?
Yeah, they are an incredible organization. I'm very, very pleased to help in a very small way myself by being the secretary of Iowa, which is something I've been doing for the last year. And I love the organization. And when I saw that you'd been an approved education provider, I had to ask the question. It would have been wrong for me not to. So thank you so much for that. And I'm sure they'd love to have you back. That's for sure. I mentioned at the introduction, Stan, that you were the author of the book called Drug Court Treatment, The Verdict. Can you tell us about your book and what your aims were when you wrote it? It seems fascinating.
Yeah, well, that was a real ironic experience and a shocker to me. One day I was sitting in the gallery in the courtroom, and the court clerk came over to me and she said, "The judge wants to see you after court." And I thought, "Oh, I'm in trouble now." Generally, if it's standing in front of a judge, you got some kind of problem,
Oh yeah.
So I go up to up to the bench after court. He says, you know, I've been meaning to have a talk with you. And he said, I've been doing this for over 10 years. And he said, I've never seen results like you're getting. He said, I need to learn more about this. So we talked, and finally it's getting toward the end of the day. And he says, you know what? He said, you got to write a book about how you do drug court treatment. He said, everybody in this field needs to learn how to do that. In fact, he said, you know what? He said, not only that, he said, you got to write a book for us attorneys too. So I'll tell you what, he said, every one of these attorneys involved in this program, he said, they know the law backwards and forwards. None of them know anything about what you're doing, and they need to know because it'll help them help their clients. So I thought, okay, well, how do I do that? I'm not an attorney. I don't know the jargon or anything like this, you know. So I started with a continuing legal education document. You know, attorneys have to have continuing ed just like counselors, but they just call it CLEs, continuing legal ed. And so then the judge thought it'd be a good idea if I did a continuing legal ed program. So I did, and I bounced it off of an attorney friend of mine who's been really helpful being a beta reader for me. She read my book for drug court treatment, the verdict, and she looked over the attorney CLE program. She said, Stan, she said, you ought to send this to a school I went to. And I said, well, tell me more. And she told me about the Trial Lawyers College. And so I contacted them, and once they verified who I was and that I was referred to them, said, yeah, send your document over. So I sent it over, and they got back to me the next day or the day after and said, Stan, this is a great program. We want to use this for our attorneys, but we've got a problem. We're shut down because of the pandemic. And I said, well, yeah, I got the same problem. And they said, but we want to use it. We're going to figure something out. And got back with me. An attorney got back with me. I think it was the next day. They said, we figured out what we want to do is we want to do a podcast with you. People will learn about your program. So we did that. It's supposed to be a 30-minute podcast. Ended up to be 45. And they posted it on their website. I was really proud of that. Here I was with all these attorneys and judges, and that they thought enough, along with the judge, to consider this valuable information. So it all worked together with the book, Drug Court Treatment, the verdict, and because that was the suggestion of the judge, and he stayed on me for 3 years to get that book done. Yeah. And I finally did, and said he liked it so much he wrote the foreword to it. Yeah. And that led to the next book. There's an ebook on Amazon. It's called Belief Eye Movement Therapy. Mm-hmm. And it's a way to change limiting, hurtful beliefs in as little as 15 or 20 minutes. And I've got testimonials that'll verify that. I've had people witness the work with live cases that came right out of drug court. And people are kind of amazed at the results, but I'm having a flashback of something that we may cover. It's a counselor from Illinois, had 30 years experience, and when he took my CE class. In fact, he was the only person who got 100% on that version of the
C class.
He said, he was shocked that about this information about beliefs. He said he was always taught that you can't change a core belief. And he said something like, I got it here. He said, you not only taught me that you can change limiting beliefs, but he said they must be changed as soon as possible. So he became a believer in the treatment. And people that I get a chance to work with are just amazing. I've had people tell me, Stan, you changed my life in 20 minutes. And I thought, wow, that's a huge statement. The more people in this world need to get that message, Mm-hmm. And that's why I put the program together. hopefully it'll be some kind of legacy that, more counselors and therapists will pick up on it.
Yeah.
But, paperwork, reports don't change anybody. When it comes to addiction and criminal thinking and conduct, to me, the goal is you got to change the behavior. But it's like all these experts say, and it goes back 2,000 years to Epictetus, you got to change your beliefs first. It's the cognitive stuff, before it's going to be the behavioral stuff.
That must have been a very, very powerful testimonial when someone said to you, Stan, you changed my way of thinking my life in 20 minutes.
Brought tears.
I'm getting emotional thinking about it. No, it just brings tears to my eyes, having that experience. I'm like a baby if someone says that, but it's rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
You get through the tears and it's rewarding.
Yeah. As this work should be. It should be rewarding. And what you've explained to me in the last 25 minutes has just been quite incredible. And to hear the impact of your work has had on so many people, and to be told by a judge to write a book is just that's wonderful. So big kudos to you.
Thank you. You can imagine how shocked I was.
Oh yeah.
Because the second he said that, I had a flashback to the judge who turned me down back home. And I thought, what a contrast. Two judges, one won't give you the time of the day, and the other one says you got to write a book. How do you explain that?
Well, one judge was right and one judge was very wrong. That's all I can say.
It makes me wonder, though, about the field, because like I say, paperwork doesn't change anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But the emphasis on the programs is, okay, now you got to do this. You got to do this assessment, this intake assessment. And they come in, this is how you do it. And this is the beat of the program right here, how you describe the client, I looked over the charts of other counselors with their assessments of the same people. And I've heard the case managers and counselors in court at staffing talk about the same person. And I thought, you know what? That person is my client, and this doesn't sound anything like that situation. So what you read in the reports and what's actually going on are two completely different things. And that's why I don't like to depend on what another counselor or therapist said about this particular client, because I think it has a chance to create a bias that you might start out with a negative attitude about this person based on that last author's report. Well, the historian, I thought, oh no, that's kind of a dangerous situation. So I like to talk with the clients and face to face, knee to knee. No big oak desk between us or anything like that. Just eyeball to eyeball. And I gave each client a chart, and there's like 13 different what I call presuppositions on the chart. And I said, which one stands out here to you to be the most effective or meaningful to you? And I recall that every one of them would touch. They'd all point the touch on the piece of paper on the wall. This one right here. And number 9 was worn away from so much skin oil and so many people touching it. And it was anybody can do anything. And I thought, okay, now this gives me some insight about this person's beliefs. This is a very empowering belief that anybody can do anything. And if they can do it, I can do it. So to me, it addressed their beliefs about capability, which is one of the major beliefs. I've come up with like 20 different beliefs that are holding people back. In fact, I used to collect beliefs from the clients in group and with their permission to use them. And the two most common belief problems were one was identity and the other one was values. And, addiction and criminal thinking and conduct definitely addresses values. What's right or wrong. Values are about what's right or wrong in your world. So immediately, first day, I've got some insight into their beliefs, and I've got some direction about what we need to address. And then as best possible, I'll put that in the soap notes, whatever.
Mhm.
To me, it's a different process. It's not a paperwork process. It's a cognitive process. And it's like you're not going to sell, like going back to insurance. I'm not going to sell any insurance by writing about it. Sending a nice little note. I talk to the prospect, find out what their needs and wants are, their beliefs and values, show how you can address that, and then you get the sale.
Like you said earlier, Stan, this is life changing stuff, and it must be.
Oh,
It's a very different approach, and it must kind of shock some clients as well to be like, oh my gosh, I've never really thought of this before. Where if someone's been through treatment before, they have the assessments, the counselling, but they don't actually get to the core of the beliefs.
as you're saying that, I had a flashback to a client who was he was in prison for 20 years, in and out of prison for 20 years. He was in our program, and he said, Stan, he said, I'm going to tell you what, he said, you're the only person that has ever said this to me. He said, anybody else in this field said, as long as you stay sober, you're going to be okay. Well, I just can't agree with that, because there's what those figures are in relapse and recidivism. Who was it? Modic, and doing a disservice to the person. Modic and Danziger wrote a book, Healing Addiction with EMDR. EMDR is like belief I moment therapy.
Yeah.
But they report that in the first year of treatment, 40 to 60% of the people relapse. Well, if ever they're going to be not using alcohol or other drugs, it's going to be in the first 6 months to a year of treatment. They say that 40 to 60% of the people relapse in the first year. By the second year, 80% relapse. Well, what I'm saying is, if you don't change their permission granting core beliefs about alcohol and other drugs and criminal thinking and conduct, you're not expecting any long-term change. So I agree 100% with Wanberg and Milkman and the other experts like Beck and Hellis and all of them. Got to work on their beliefs.
Yep.
So this guy said, you're the only guy in over 20 years that has ever talked about beliefs and changing them, and this guy's doing fine to this day.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
It's just lovely to hear that your work is having such an impact on so many clients and the profession as well. I think as well with your book that's going to be read by many, many lawyers, attorneys who are working in drug courts. It's very important that lawyers get the chance to learn about their clients as well, because I don't think many do. I've worked with lots of lawyers in the past before, and they just see a client who's using drugs as just a person without kind of no understanding addiction. And I think there's a disconnect there. So where can someone get hold of your book, Stan? I'd just like to ask, I'm going to put a link in the notes here, but where can someone get a copy of your book?
Amazon.com.
Yep.
I've got a half a dozen books there now, addressing everything from relapse and recidivism to AA to drug court treatment to belief 5 movement therapy. They're similar because they overlap, like a Venn diagram. Everything overlaps in this field. But yeah, thanks for suggesting that. Stan Docmanis, and it's at Amazon.com.
Yep.
It should show my bookshelf there.
Excellent. Well, I'll make sure that we have a link in all of where we publish these podcasts now. So thank you for that. I'd just like to move on a little bit, because I've been interviewing many states around the country, and I've kind of got a few questions I like to ask everyone on these podcasts. With what's going on with the opioid crisis around the country and now around the world, how is Hawaii coping with what's going on? Are they addressing it properly head on, or would you say?
It's interesting that you say properly, and I know that's in the UK. It's going to be properly. they're addressing it, Chris. They're addressing it.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
but it's problematic like everywhere else. Fentanyl, same thing. Hawaii is culturally sensitive. There's some differences. Like, for instance, marijuana has been here through everyone's life. I mean, just everybody uses a lot of growing, a lot of dealing. So for those who are gateway theorists, they can see that's a problem because it's not a huge leap to the next drug when your peers are pressuring you, you know, oh, come on, try this, look at me.
Yeah.
Didn't hurt me. And so then before you know it, they're doing crystal meth or, the opioids or fentanyl
Yeah.
or name it. It's all of them. We're the crossroads of the Pacific here, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And everything that's for sale in Asia is here. Everything that's for sale from the cartels in Mexico is here. Everything that's for sale from South America is here. Plus, you got all the labs and the patches that people are maintaining on their own here.
Okay.
So it's I guess to answer the question, yeah, it's being addressed. Probably with the same success as the other states.
Right.
Because everybody's sharing that knowledge, here's what we learned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's something I've been learning about as well with speaking to the different states and finding out what is going on with fentanyl and opioids. It's been fascinating for me to hear the different angles and ways that enforcement and drug services are dealing with this.
Right.
As I said to you before we started recording, the UK is now going through the same thing. And it seems to just be going across Europe now and the rest of the world, sadly. So it's very, very difficult times, that's for sure. One other question I like to ask is about stigma. Why do you think in this day and age that stigma of addiction and mental health still stops people from wishing to attend as a therapist or a service to address these issues? It seems to be we're still in this kind of, we're just stuck here with stigma.
I can tell you from a personal experience. Mm-hmm. Stigma, I think, is like a form of fear. If it's internal, so there's internal stigma and there's external stigma. Okay, my shame, your guilt, stuff like that. So I think for me, I had an alcohol use disorder problem, and I knew I had a problem. It's like I wasn't in total denial about this thing. I was already in contemplation or preparation. And I asked a registered nurse one time, what do you think would happen if I quit drinking? And she said, well, you'd probably go into delirium tremens, and then you'd have to go into the hospital and be detoxed. And I thought, well, that's not going to happen. But, everybody in town will know their insurance agent's a souse, and, that would not be good for business. So I had the internal stigma. It was my fear of being stigmatized, and my reputation would be ruined. So that's how I feel about stigma. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to realize the difference between the internal stigma and the external. I think the external is a shame when people are berating people because they have this, that, or the other. You wouldn't criticize or demean anybody for having diabetes or cancer, but as soon as it's alcohol or you're a pothead or something like that, the name calling, the shaming. So the stigma is the shaming, right?
Yep.
So that's why I think it's so important, and that's one of the things that that I often need to address in the belief 5 movement therapy, because you have to desensitize that. Where the stigma was a huge issue before, after the belief 5 movement therapy, like on a 1 to 10 scale, it might have been a 10 being really high before, but after the EMT, it's down to a 0 or a 1, and I'm satisfied if it's a 0 or a 1. I don't think it harms to have some of it, like pain. Do you want to eliminate pain 100%, or because we know pain's a signal there's something wrong? So, we don't want it to vanish. You want some type of indicator on your dashboard that there's something wrong here. So that, 0 to 1 on the pain, to me is acceptable. If it's acceptable, for the client. But I had, let me double check here. I had sent a testimonial to you, I think, with this lady who was having intestinal problems for 11 years. And, here we go. The therapy was successful on the first try. I know you may be thinking this is impossible, but I'm living proof. My intestines are no longer running my life, eliminating it, as I should say. I am now off all medications, and I've been able to return to work. My daily activities are no longer limited as they were for the past 11 years. I highly recommend this therapy with Stan Doc-Manis. I'm fortunate to be relieved of my pain and limitations and begin functioning fully in my life. I'm sincerely grateful to Stan for his work. It's all possible because of him. That, when I first read that, that was one of those tearful moments. And I felt that way as we were doing the work because I could see the relief.
So you helped this lady who was going through this pain for 11 years.
She couldn't work.
Gosh. Wow. I can imagine being emotional getting that testimonial as well. I mean, you can't get any more of a positive response than that, surely.
No. And then, when we were talking, she approached me about help. And I thought, well, this is okay. Now we're meeting each other where we're at, right?
Yep.
I'm listening to her story. I want to hear her version of what's going on. And as she went on, I'm thinking, this certainly sounds like a belief to me. So I just had to clarify that with her. I said, okay, now here, help me out here. Just let's take a moment I need a clarification. You said to me this, and I just rephrased what she said. She said, "Oh yeah," and I says, "Well, does that sound like a belief to you?" And then she thought for a moment. She says, "Well, yeah, I guess it's a belief." And I said, "Well, does it seem like a limiting belief or an empowering belief?" She said, "Well, it's definitely limiting." And I said, "Well, if I could show you a way to eliminate that limiting belief and give you something empowering to work with, would you be interested in seeing how it works?" And she thought for like a split second. She said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." So boom, that was it. We just went into the office and did the Belief 5 Women therapy. And in her case, I think it was more like an hour, 40 minutes to an hour. But you see, that's what happened as a result of it. So it's that conversation. It's important. What is a person really saying, and what's between the lines? Now, hers was not an addiction issue; it was a physical health issue. But if you take situations like Matthew Perry, that I think I read his book, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, and in fact, I read it 5 times. So I've got that book so marked up, nobody would recognize it anymore. But there was an idea. There's an example of. Here's a guy who spent $8 million on treatment, like 65 different treatments, 15 different detox. He had surgery. His intestines just went through everything. And finally, now we're finding out, he had 17 shots, ketamine shots, the week before he died. So apparently, his permission granting core beliefs had not been addressed sufficiently. And we see the results. Could it be any worse?
No, not at all. So would you recommend someone read Matthew's book?
Oh yes.
Yeah, clearly.
I think clearly, whether you're a counselor, a therapist, or you're having substance use disorder problems, read that book. Yeah. Don't read any of my books. Read his book.
No, read Stan's books as well, please.
Read that book and then read it again.
Yeah. Excellent.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's shocking.
Mhm.
And then, Newsweek came out with their 350 best treatment organizations in the country. And I thought, well, 350 and there's 17,000 of them. So what does that say about the bottom 20%?
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Goodness.
There's just a lot of work to be done in this field.
Oh yeah, yeah, most definitely. And I'm finding out about that in every one of these podcasts, and I really am. Um, One of the last questions I ask, it's kind of a little bit controversial, but I ask all my guests this because I get some interesting varied answers anyway. But can you tell me your opinion of harm reduction and how it can play a role in recovery?
I think harm reduction is critical. It's a must. And if we look at that, going back to when I talked about being oriented, and when the guy decided to hire me, he shows me the CBT map. Well, CBT and this particular manual, this 300-page manual, was pure harm reduction.
Mm.
There's going to be no magic there. There's not going to be any changes in 20 minutes or 40 minutes or 60 minutes. This is a process that everybody's depending on. That after 18 months, possibly you'll consider not doing criminal thinking and conduct anymore. I have a more acute approach to change, but that's the pure definition of harm reduction.
Yep.
But also, what about belief change as a method of harm reduction? I think belief change is a key to harm reduction. If these other people are correct, like Ellis and Beck and Wanberg and Milkman and Miller and Rolnick and Tim Hallbaum, he had something to do with a book called Beliefs, Pathways to Wellness or something like that. But if we don't change the beliefs, there's not going to be a long-term behavior change. So isn't that pure harm reduction?
Oh, to its core, most definitely.
Yeah, I think it's basic. I mean, focus on that. That first hour, the first day, the first week of treatment, focus more on the beliefs and the paperwork.
Yep.
You've got a year to do the paperwork. You got a year and a half to paperwork. You can catch up.
Yeah.
Administrations are going to take care of billing. Don't worry about help the people change.
That's a really interesting one to start harm reduction with beliefs. I think that's profound. It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
So, okay. So, collecting these beliefs, from the clients, they say, well, I can put anything I want in my body. I'm no good anyway. What difference does it make?
Mm.
Well, that's definitely a belief about identity.
Mm.
Then there's some values and there's capability. And then, in the drug court, environment, you're definitely talking about environment. So, those major beliefs. And then you want to listen for helpless, hopeless, worthless, all of those. And then you get a chance to just, ask for the clarification and rephrase what you thought you heard. And did I hear that correctly? Can you help me with that?
Yep.
And then you can get on to, in the stages of change, they're talking about, even in a training class, they'll tell you, well, when you get people in your group, they're going to be in pre-contemplation and they're kicking and screaming and all that, Oh, well, true. Other, 70-80% of them could be in pre-contemplation when they come in. A lot of them come in because they're faking it. They'd rather be there than in prison, and that was the choice. But, helping them recognize the stages of change. And another thing, Chris, stages of change. Generally they talk about the 5 of them. And then the 6th one would be relapse or recycling. But I think we have to stress the 7th one. And I think that's what happened for me when remember when I asked the nurse what happened if I stopped drinking?
Yes.
And then she said, you'd go in the DT and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, phooey on that. So much later, I thought, well, this is getting bad. I got to do something, because I watched an uncle die of cirrhosis of the liver, and that was not attractive. And I used visualization. I thought, well, this is what I got coming. I'll go just like him if I keep going like this. So that was on the left. And over on the right, I visualized how I wanted to be. I wanted my heart, lungs, and esophagus to be clear and pink, as opposed to brown and yucky, like a oxygen tube of someone who's a smoker. You ever seen one of those?
Yes, sadly I have. Yeah.
Oh, disgusting.
Yep.
And I thought, okay, that's what I've got. That's disgusting. Here's what I want. So there's a great dissonance there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what did it for my brain. So I explained that to a therapist. Here's where I am. So here, meet me where I'm at. Here's where I want to go. Please take me there, like an Uber. Uber will meet you where you're at and take you where you want to go.
Yeah.
And that's what we should be doing.
Yeah.
And that's what this therapist did for me in 1 2-hour session. 1 2-hour session.
Yeah.
So from that point, I believe I transcended that I call the 7th stage of change, transcendence.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a couple spirited arguments with colleagues at work about that. Like, oh no, it's pre-con, preparation, action, maintenance. And I said, well, I can't go along with you on that. We never did come to an agreement. But I think transcendence is the way to go if you want to save your liver. At least that's the way it was for me. My liver couldn't have put up with my behavior much longer.
Wow.
And couldn't wait for me to spend all that time in the stages of change and one program after another.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Stan. That was very inspiring. I love your explanation around harm reduction. That was fantastic. Last question. Do you have a message for anyone who's listening to this podcast who's going through an addiction? What would you say to them?
That's right next to what I just got done saying. My experience with the cognitive dissonance, and here's what I had, and this is what I wanted, and I had to find someone to get me across those stages of change. If I can do it, you can do it, because I was in a bad way. I'm going to share a story with you, Chris, I'm not too proud of.
Okay.
I was going with a young lady whose parents owned a bar. And they said, Stan, we've never seen anybody drink like you do. Now, this is not something you ordinarily want to hear, have a lot of people know, Mm-hmm. But if it would help in your work and get the message across, I'm willing to throw that out there. If I can do it, you can do it. If you mess with snakes, you can get bitten. The venom can kill you. That's what alcohol is. It's the venom. It's also the snake. But we all need to examine our core permission granting beliefs. And that's whether we're the client, the patient, or the counselor or therapist. We all need to examine our core beliefs, because it's like the guy, his name was Armin Welsh. He was the counselor in Illinois, 30 years experience. Armin told me, Stan, he said, I was taught you cannot change core beliefs. So he had a belief about not being able to change core beliefs. So couldn't you see, as a counselor, he could benefit from doing the belief eye movement therapy and changing that belief. Mm-hmm. And then he could be more effective as a counselor. Then he can teach his clients how to do that for each other, because a husband and wife can do this for each other once they know the basics. And they can always call for help or tune-up if they need, hey, Stan, it's not working. You've probably heard this with your experience in the field. People have tried these other methods. And I'm not going to name the methods, because I just don't think it'd be professionally appropriate. But they'll say, I tried this, I can't do it. It's not working for me. It's not working for my clients. Well, with this method, I can teach anybody how to do this, and they can teach it to their significant others, so they can get the help right there. You've seen these what they call it, the animals, the caregiving animals. Like, how they train dogs. The dog can tell when there's going something wrong with you, and the dog will make you sit down. And some dogs will even push the medicine over toward you. Here's what you got to take this. Have you seen that?
I've heard about it. Yeah.
It's amazing stuff.
Yeah.
It's just amazing that someone had that idea and can teach that dog how to do this and recognize it. Teach the dog how to recognize the symptom, something's going wrong, and then here's the solution. Well, it's the same thing with this.
Yeah.
People it's that simple. You can teach it to anybody.
Yeah.
And they can teach it to anybody.
You mentioned this earlier, Stan, but can you tell our listeners how to best to contact you and to find out about your amazing service online? I'm sure people would love to speak to you.
Online, it would be my name, Stan Docmanus, STANDOKMANUS.com. And tell them my phone number, Chris?
You please do if you feel free, yeah.
808-385-4550. 808-38. And if I can help you, I believe that's what I'm here for. And you can find me on LinkedIn too, Stan Docmanus.
Yep. That's where we thankfully met.
Yeah. And I am thankful for that.
No, me too.
Where our paths have crossed in a couple different ways, LinkedIn and NAADAC.
That's right.
Plus the field.
That's right. And I'm very, very pleased to have spoken to you for the last hour and to get to know you. And your work is incredible. And
Thank you.
It's very powerful. And I think everyone should be hearing about a lot more about this.
Thank you. Chris.
You're the first person, I think, and I think this is my 60th podcast, and no one's discussed this. There's no criticism of any other therapist at all, but I think this is quite important stuff, and I think people do need to acknowledge this.
And doesn't it make sense as an initial move?
Totally.
Let's address this the first hour, the first day, the first week. Why put it off? Because this guy can be dead with a needle in its arm next week.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. I'm sure many clients and professionals. I mean, you're working with lawyers, you're working with attorneys. You've got a judge that's forwarded your book. Just so impressed with your work, and and keep doing the great work that you're doing. And thank you so much for being such a great guest today. And I've already taken up an hour of your time today, so I really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about you. And thank you for everything you do for your clients. And I really appreciate it. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, and you're welcome. And I sure hope I get a chance to work with you more, because I really appreciate what you're doing.
Oh, thank you very much, Dan. Much appreciated.